For 95% of people, trading is a nightmare. It's a relentless cycle of blown accounts, shattered confidence, and the bitter belief that the game is rigged. They swear the algos are hunting their stops. They blame the news, the brokers, and the unseen hands. They blame everything except the mirror. Meanwhile, for the 5%, it's almost boring. It's systematic, predictable, even dull. Same charts, same 24 hours, same candles. So, what's the glitch in the matrix? It's not IQ. I've seen PhDs, surgeons, and engineers, the smartest minds on the planet, get liquidated in weeks. It's not the size of your bankroll. Whether you have $100 or $100,000, the failure rate is identical. The difference? The 95% are fighting a war they can't win. The 5% are playing a game they've already won. Let's look deeper into our two archetypes, David and Sarah. David represents the optimization fallacy. He believes that if 3 indicators are good, 47 are better. He is searching for the holy grail, that mythical combination of variables that yields a 100% win rate. His failure isn't a lack of effort, it's a surplus of it. He's working hard at the wrong thing. He spends his nights backtesting 50 different versions of a strategy, looking for the one that never loses. But backtesting a perfect past is not the same as trading an uncertain future. Sarah, the former casino dealer, has a massive advantage over David. She doesn't have a PhD, but she understands the edge. In a casino, the house doesn't win every hand of blackjack. In fact, the house only wins about 51 to 52% of the time. To a gambler, that feels like a coin flip. To the house, that 2% difference is a multi-billion-dollar certainty. Sarah knows that her rules are her edge. She doesn't need to know if the next trade is a winner. She only needs to know that if she takes 1,000 trades, her rules will ensure she ends up in the green. She has removed ego from the equation. When Sarah loses a trade, she doesn't feel like a failure. She feels like a casino owner who just paid out a jackpot. It's just the cost of doing business. The war versus the game. The 95% are at war. Every morning they sit at their desk, knuckles white, staring at the screen like it's a battlefield. Their heart rate spikes with every tick against them. They're fighting for their survival, their ego, and their dream of freedom. When you're at war, you're emotional. And when you're emotional, you make mistakes. You revenge trade. You hold losers because you can't admit you're wrong. You cut winners early because you're terrified the market will take the money back. The 5% have already won the game before the market even opens. How? Because their win isn't tied to today's P&L. Their win is the fact that they have a plan and the discipline to follow it. They have detached their self-worth from the green and red numbers on the screen. They understand that the market is a liquidity-providing machine. It moves from one level of trapped traders to another. The 5% are the ones providing the liquidity that the 95% are desperately trying to grab. The barrier to entry. Trading is the only profession in the world where a complete amateur can have a successful day on their first try. You can't perform heart surgery on your first day and succeed by luck. You can't fly a Boeing 747 by accident. But you can click buy on a random stock and make $5,000 in 10 minutes. This is the ultimate trap. This beginner's luck convinces the 95% that trading is easy money. It masks the reality that they have no process. When the luck runs out, and it always does, they don't have a foundation to fall back on. They start looking for why it stopped working, leading them back into the cycle of complexity and indicators.
To understand why David failed despite his high intelligence, we have to look at his workspace. David viewed the price chart as a raw, dangerous beast that needed to be tamed with filters. He believed that the more filters he applied, the purer the signal would be. He started with the basics, moving averages. But then he wondered, which one is best? The 50, the 200, the exponential, or the simple? Instead of choosing, he added all of them. Then came the oscillators, RSI to tell him if it was overbought, MACD to show momentum, and stochastic for timing. Then he added Bollinger Bands for volatility and Fibonacci levels for hidden support. This is what professionals call redundancy. Most of these indicators are lagging, meaning they are just mathematical derivatives of the same thing, past price and volume. By adding 47 indicators, David wasn't getting 47 times the information. He was getting 47 different ways to see the past, which created a hall of mirrors effect. When the price moved up, his RSI said sell, overbought, but his moving average said buy, trend is up, and his MACD was neutral. David was trapped in analysis paralysis. He would sit for hours waiting for all 47 indicators to align. On the rare occasion they did, the move was usually already over. He was entering the market just as the smart money was exiting. Because he was late, he felt the need to catch up, leading him to take larger risks on subpar setups. Sarah's workspace was the polar opposite. Her chart was almost naked, just the price bars and perhaps one or two key levels of historical significance. She didn't care about predicting where the price was going in the next hour. She only cared about her trigger. Sarah understood a concept that escapes most. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Because her rules were few, her decision-making was fast. In the heat of the market, when candles are flashing and the P&L is swinging, your brain loses the ability to perform complex logic. This is cognitive load. David's brain was constantly overheating, trying to calculate 47 variables. Sarah's brain was calm because she only had to answer 3 yes-no questions. David's biggest mistake was a psychological bias called the illusion of knowledge. Research has shown that as people get more information about a subject, their confidence in their predictions increases significantly, but their accuracy rarely does. David spent 3 hours every morning reading analyst reports from big banks and scanning social media for sentiment. He thought this made him an informed trader. In reality, it made him a biased trader. If he read a report saying the euro should go up, his brain would subconsciously ignore every sell signal on his chart and only look for buy signals. He wasn't trading the market, he was trading his own opinion. Sarah practiced strategic ignorance. She didn't care what the analysts said. She knew that the big banks often release reports to create the very liquidity they need to trade against. By ignoring the noise, she remained objective. She traded the price on the screen, not the story in her head. The most mechanical difference between the two was how they handled their ammunition, their capital. David viewed risk as a flexible suggestion. If he felt really sure about a trade because his 47 indicators finally aligned, he would risk 5% or 10% of his account. He was trying to make it big on a single trade. This is gambling, not trading. When those high-conviction trades failed, and they do because the market is random in the short term, the emotional damage was catastrophic. A 10% loss requires an 11% gain just to get back to break even. A 50% loss requires a 100% gain. David was constantly digging himself out of holes. Sarah viewed risk as a fixed cost of doing business, 1%, no exceptions. If she lost a trade, she didn't care because she knew she had 99 more lives in her account. She didn't need any single trade to be a winner. This allowed her to stay in the flow state. She wasn't attached to the outcome because the outcome of a single trade was statistically irrelevant to her long-term success. After 18 months, the results were a mathematical certainty. David had blown 4 accounts. Every time he failed, he thought the problem was the strategy, so he would go back and add more indicators, making the problem worse. He was in a doom loop of complexity. Sarah, with her boring 42% gain, had achieved something David never could: consistency. She wasn't a millionaire yet, but she had proven that her process worked. In the world of the 5%, a 42% return is a massive victory because it can be scaled. Once you can make 42% on $10,000, you can do it on $1 million.
For hundreds of thousands of years, the human brain evolved for one primary purpose: survival. To survive, we developed a highly efficient threat detection system centered in the amygdala. When our ancestors saw a rustle in the grass, they didn't perform a multi-indicator analysis of the wind speed and the probability of a predator. They felt a surge of adrenaline, their heart rate spiked, and they ran. This is the fight-or-flight response. In nature, it's a masterpiece of engineering. In trading, it is a virus. When you're in a trade and the price begins to move against you, your amygdala does not see a statistical fluctuation of $200. It sees a threat to your resources, an attack on your survival. It floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logic, planning, and Sarah's 3 rules, literally shuts down. You lose the ability to think rationally. You are no longer a modern trader. You are a caveman trying to survive a predator. This is why you freeze when price hits your stop loss, or why you revenge trade to win back what was stolen from you. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky discovered a principle called loss aversion. Through extensive study, they proved that the pain of losing $1,000 is twice as powerful as the joy of gaining $1,000. This biological bias creates a behavioral gap that destroys the 95%. Because losing hurts so much, your brain will do anything to avoid the pain of realizing a loss. The 95% will hold a losing trade, moving their stop loss further and further away, hoping and praying for a turnaround. They would rather risk their entire account than admit they were wrong now. The 5% have trained themselves to override this. They view a loss as a simple data point, the cost of doing business. They have hacked their biology to accept that being wrong is not a threat to their survival. Humans are pattern-seeking primates. We are hardwired to find order in chaos. Our ancestors who recognized the pattern of the seasons or the tracks of an animal survived. However, the financial markets are a low-validity environment. This means that while patterns exist, they are surrounded by immense amounts of random noise. The 95% fall victim to apophenia, seeing patterns where none exist. This is why a trader will see a head and shoulders pattern on a 1-minute chart during a news release and bet their savings on it. Their brain is desperately trying to create certainty in a random environment. They find a pattern, get a hit of dopamine, and feel a false sense of control. When the pattern fails, as it often does, they feel betrayed. The 5% understand that a setup is not a guarantee. It is simply a moment where the probability of a move in one direction is slightly higher than the other. They don't look for certainty, they look for an edge. In almost every other area of life, there's a direct correlation between effort and reward. If you study harder, you get better grades. If you work more hours, you get a bigger paycheck. This is the linear success model. Trading is non-linear and counterintuitive. In the market, doing more often leads to having less. More trades equals more commissions and more chances for error. More indicators equals more confusion. More screen time equals more emotional exhaustion. Your brain interprets doing nothing as failing. Sitting in front of a screen for 8 hours and not taking a trade feels like a wasted day to a 95% trader. To feel productive, they force a trade. They manufacture a setup. They interact with the market just to feel the dopamine hit of working. The 5% have mastered the most difficult human skill: patience. They understand that in trading, you are paid for waiting, not for acting. They have decoupled their sense of work from their sense of activity. Humans are social animals. In the wild, being cast out of the tribe meant death. Therefore, we are biologically programmed to follow the crowd. When everyone on Twitter is screaming, "Buy gold," your brain feels a powerful urge to join them. This is herding behavior. The problem?
The crowd is almost always wrong at the most critical turning points. The 95% seek social proof to validate their trades. They want to feel the safety of the tribe. The 5% are comfortable being lonely. They trust their own process over the noise of the crowd. They know that if everyone is already in, there is no one left to buy, and the market is likely to reverse. To succeed, you must become unnatural. You must learn to love losing, not because you like losing money, but because you love the discipline of cutting a trade when it's wrong. Embrace boredom, accepting that the best trading is repetitive and unexciting. Ignore your gut. Your gut is usually just your lizard brain trying to save its ego. The 5% aren't people who don't feel fear or greed. They are people who have built a mental firewall between their feelings and their mouse finger. They recognize the biological impulse, acknowledge it, and then ignore it in favor of their rules.
From the moment you enter the school system, you are taught that the world is a series of cause and effect relationships. If you follow the formula, you get the answer. If you follow the speed limit, you don't get a ticket. This creates a deep-seated psychological need for structure. We crave a world where A always leads to B. The market, however, is a probabilistic environment. This means that you can do everything perfectly. You can have the perfect setup, the perfect risk management, and the perfect entry, and the trade can still fail. This is the uncertainty paradox. You have 100% control over your actions, the process, but 0% control over the result, the outcome. To the 95%, this is terrifying. To the 5%, this is the source of their edge. Because the 95% cannot handle the not knowing, they embark on a lifelong quest for the Holy Grail. They believe that if they just find the right indicator, the right smart money concept, or the right hidden Fibonacci level, they will finally be able to predict the future. They are looking for certainty in a place where only probability exists. When a 95% trader loses 3 trades in a row, they don't see it as a statistical variance. They see it as a broken system. They think, this strategy doesn't work anymore, and they move on to the next one. They spend years jumping from system to system, never staying with one long enough to let the law of large numbers work in their favor. They are trying to grab smoke. The harder they squeeze, the less they hold. To understand how the 5% thrive in uncertainty, look back at Sarah's casino. When a high roller walks up to the roulette table and bets $100,000 on red, does the casino owner panic? Does he sweat? Does he try to predict where the ball will land? No. The owner is perfectly calm. Why? Because while he has zero certainty about that specific spin, micro-randomness, he has total certainty about the next 10,000 spins, macro-certainty. He knows that the green 0 on the wheel gives him a mathematical edge that will inevitably transfer the gambler's money to the casino over time. The 5% have adopted this casino mindset. They have accepted that any individual trade is essentially a coin flip with a slight bias. Because they don't need to know what happens next, they don't feel the need to overanalyze, overcomplicate, or stress. They have moved from being the gambler to being the house. The 95% are often victims of hindsight bias. They look back at a chart and say, oh, it was so obvious that the price was going to bounce there. I should have taken that trade. This is a lie the brain tells itself to create a false sense of security. Looking at a chart after the fact, with all the data visible, is easy. Trading the hard right edge of the screen, where the future is a blank void, is the only thing that matters. The 5% ignore the I should have and I knew it thoughts. They know that knowing, in hindsight, is useless. They only care about what their rules tell them to do in the present moment of uncertainty. The human brain uses a massive amount of energy to process uncertainty. This is why trading is so exhausting. When you are in a trade and you don't know the outcome, your brain is in a constant state of scanning for threats. The 95% try to stop this exhaustion by adding more filters to make themselves feel more certain. But more filters lead to more confusion, which leads to more stress. It's a self-destructing cycle. The 5% reduce the emotional toll by pre-accepting the loss. Before they even click buy, they have already mentally spent the money they are risking. They assume the trade is a loser. If it turns into a winner, great, it's a pleasant surprise. But by assuming the loss up front, they remove the fear of the unknown. There is no uncertainty if you have already accepted the worst-case scenario. To master the uncertainty paradox, you must stop being a market forecaster and start being a risk manager. Prediction is an ego-based activity. It says, I am smart enough to know what the world will do. Execution is a process-based activity. It says, I have a plan when the market does X and a plan when the market does Y. The 5% don't care about being right. They care about being disciplined. They know that the market doesn't owe them a profit just because they analyzed it for 3 hours. The only thing they are owed is the result of their edge over a long enough sample size.
In this 5th chapter, we examine the war of seconds. In almost any other high-level profession, you have the luxury of time to process your mistakes. In trading, the market judges you in real time, tick by tick. Part 5. The Instant Feedback Loop. The Psychological Speed Trap. In the traditional world, we are insulated from immediate failure. If you're an architect, you design a building over months. If you make a mistake in the blueprints, a colleague might catch it in a review weeks later. Even if the building is flawed, the feedback, the crack in the foundation, might not appear for years. This delay provides emotional distance. It allows the ego to stay intact because the failure is disconnected from the moment of action. Trading is the ultimate instant feedback machine. You decide to buy. You click the button. Within seconds, the screen flashes red. You are wrong. You are losing money. There is no delay, no filter, and no one to blame but yourself. For the 95%, this instant feedback is a psychological poison. It triggers a physiological response that makes logical trading impossible. Because the feedback is so fast, the brain perceives it as a personal attack. When the price moves against a 95% trader, they don't see a market fluctuation, they see a theft of their future. This leads to micromanagement, staring at every 1-minute candle, heart racing, hoping for the tick to move back in their favor. The instant feedback loop doesn't just punish, it also randomly rewards. This is what makes it so addictive. When you take a bad trade, one that breaks your rules, and it happens to make money, the brain receives a massive hit of dopamine. This is the exact same mechanism used by slot machines. Because the reward is instant and unpredictable, the 95% trader becomes operationally conditioned to keep pulling the lever. They stop caring about the process and start chasing the high. This is why many traders can be profitable for a week and then lose everything in a single hour of tilt. They aren't trading a system. They are feeding an addiction to the instant feedback of the market. The top 5% have recognized that they cannot change the speed of the market, so they must change their sampling rate. Sarah, our former casino dealer, doesn't watch the candles tick up and down. She understands that the noise of the market is designed to trigger emotions. She sets her orders and then walks away. By removing herself from the instant feedback loop, she protects her prefrontal cortex from the amygdala hijack. The 5% treat a trade like a letter they've sent in the mail. Once it's sent, they can't change the contents. They don't check the tracking every 5 seconds. They wait until the delivery, the take profit or stop loss, is complete. They have created an artificial delay, an emotional buffer that allows them to remain clinical while the 95% are in a state of panic. The greatest shift in Part 5 is the realization that one trade is statistically meaningless. To a 95% trader, the current trade is everything. It represents their hope, their ego, and their rent money. Because it means everything, the instant feedback feels like a life or death judgment. To a 5% trader, the current trade is just one of the next 1,000 trades they will take. It is a single drop of water in an ocean. If a single drop of water is red, the ocean is still blue.
This perspective allows them to receive the instant feedback of a loss without the emotional sting. They have depersonalized the data. A loss is not a sign that they're a bad trader. It is simply a sample error in a larger winning sequence. The most common sin in trading, moving your stop loss to avoid a loss, is a direct result of being trapped in the instant feedback loop. When price approaches your stop, the pain centers of your brain light up. To stop the pain instantly, your brain suggests a solution. Move the stop. Give it room to breathe, just for this once. In that moment, you choose short-term relief over long-term profitability. The 95% move the stop because they can't handle the instant feedback of being wrong. The 5% have built the discipline to let the stop be hit. They understand that the pain of the loss is the price they pay for the freedom of the system. If you want to survive, you must stop looking at the market in seconds and start looking at it in series. The 95% ask, "How did I do on this trade?" The 5% ask, "How did I do on the last 20 trades?" The moment you stop caring about the instant and start caring about the cumulative, the market loses its power to stress you out. You become an observer of data rather than a victim of fluctuations.
The sophistication fallacy. Human beings have an inherent bias toward complexity. We assume that if something is difficult to understand, it must be more valuable or more accurate. In most fields, this holds true. A jet engine is more advanced than a bicycle because it is more complex. A high-level surgical procedure is more sophisticated than a basic checkup. In trading, this logic is inverted. The market is already the most complex system on the planet, influenced by billions of variables, from global interest rates to the weather in Brazil. You cannot solve this complexity by adding more variables to your own system. When you add a 4th, 5th, or 47th indicator to your chart, you aren't adding depth, you are adding noise. The 95% are complexity addicts. They feel that a simple strategy, like Sarah's 3 rules, is too easy. They think, if it were that simple, everyone would be a millionaire. This thought drives them to search for something smarter. They look for neural networks, proprietary algorithms, or order flow heat maps. They want to feel like a quant at a hedge fund. But complexity is often just a mask for a lack of confidence. The paradox of choice. Psychologically, complexity is a defense mechanism. If David uses a simple strategy and loses, he has to admit his strategy, or his execution, was wrong. If David uses a massively complex strategy with 47 indicators and loses, he can blame the market conditions or a misalignment of variables. Complexity gives the ego a place to hide. However, complexity breeds analysis paralysis. According to the paradox of choice, as the number of options and variables increases, the brain's ability to make a decision decreases. When David is looking at 47 indicators, his brain is trying to solve a 47-dimensional puzzle in real time. By the time he processes all the data, the opportunity has passed. He hesitates, he misses the move, or worse, he enters out of frustration because he's tired of waiting for the perfect alignment. The 5% avoid this by reducing the number of choices they have to make. They understand that a fast decision based on a simple edge beats a perfect decision that never happens. Consumption versus production. The 95% confuse learning with trading. They spend their nights watching 10-hour seminars on advanced market geometry. They subscribe to dozens of newsletters. They read every book on technical analysis. This feels like progress. It feels like hard work. But there is a massive difference between passive consumption and active execution. The 95% are professional students. They are addicted to the aha moment of learning a new concept. They treat trading like a university degree where the person with the most notes wins. The 5% are professional executors. They know that you don't need to know everything about the market. You only need to know one thing that works, and you need to do it 10,000 times. The market does not reward you for your knowledge, it rewards you for your boredom. The 5% have accepted that a profitable system is often extremely repetitive and unexciting. They have moved past the need for intellectual stimulation and replaced it with operational efficiency. The machine metaphor. To move from the 95% to the 5%, you must view your trading system as a machine, not a work of art. Imagine a factory that produces light bulbs. The machine doesn't try to innovate or overanalyze every bulb. It follows a simple, repetitive process. Grab glass, add filament, seal, test. It does this 24 hours a day with zero emotion. David tries to be the engineer during market hours, constantly tweaking the machine while it's running. Sarah is the operator. She built the machine, her 3 rules, during her off hours, and while the market is open, she simply makes sure the machine is running. She doesn't think, she executes. The ruthless cut. The secret to part 6 is the ruthless cut. If you look at the most successful traders in history, their charts are shockingly clean. They might use one indicator to show trend and another to show value, but that's it. They have learned that robustness comes from simplicity. A system with 2 moving parts is much harder to break than a system with 200. In a high-stress environment like the market, you need a system that is anti-fragile, one that is simple enough to be followed when you are tired, stressed, or distracted. The shift. Simplicity as strength. To succeed, you must kill your addiction to being sophisticated. The 95% ask, what else can I add to make this better? The 5% ask, what else can I remove to make this clearer? When you simplify, you remove the friction between the signal and the action. You stop being a philosopher of the markets and start being a worker. You trade the reality of the price, not the complexity of your indicators.
The most common question a 95% trader asks is, how much did I make today? It seems like a logical question. After all, we trade to make money. But in the professional world, focusing on money is the fastest way to lose it. The false metric. Most people measure their self-worth by their bank account. When the account is green, they feel like geniuses. When it's red, they feel like failures. This is outcome obsession. The problem is that in trading, the outcome of any single trade is essentially random. You can follow your rules perfectly and lose money. You can break every rule in the book and make a fortune. If you measure yourself by the money, you are training your brain to reward bad behavior and punish good discipline. The shift. Rule execution versus profit chasing. The 5% have a different metric. They measure success by rule compliance. At the end of the day, Sarah doesn't look at her balance first. She looks at her checklist. Did I wait for my setup? Did I manage my risk? Did I exit where I planned? If the answer is yes to all 3, the day was a 100% success, even if she lost $2,000. She knows that if she executes her rules 100 times, the math guarantees she will be profitable. Money is just a byproduct of good process. We live in the information age, but for a trader, this is the noise age. The 95% are addicted to news, Twitter threads, and expert opinions. They believe that being informed gives them an edge. The poison of opinion. Every time you read an analyst's report or a tweet about a guaranteed move, you are polluting your objectivity. You are no longer trading the price action, you are trading someone else's bias. The 5% practice strategic ignorance. They understand that the only information that matters is the price on the chart and the volume in the market. Everything else is a distraction designed to make you hesitate. The noise filter. The more you know, the more you second-guess. If your system says buy, but a famous billionaire on TV says the market is crashing, you will hesitate. That hesitation is the difference between a winner and a break-even trade. The 5% cut the cord. They trade in a vacuum,
focusing only on their internal signals. In the corporate world, doing nothing gets you fired. In trading, doing nothing is often the highest paid activity you can perform. Manufacturing versus hunting. The 95% feel they have to trade to be productive. They sit down at 9 a.m. and decide they must find a setup. They are manufacturing trades. They force the market to fit their desire for action. The 5% are hunters. They have no desire to work. They have a very specific set of criteria, and they're perfectly happy sitting for 6 hours doing absolutely nothing if those criteria aren't met. The high conviction strike. By doing nothing, you preserve two things, your capital and your mental energy. When the obvious trade finally appears, the 5% are fresh and ready to strike with full conviction. The 95% are already exhausted and chopped up from taking 10 mediocre trades that went nowhere. The final step isn't a strategy, it's a transformation. You must stop seeing yourself as a trader and start seeing yourself as a rule-following machine. The death of ego. The 95% trade to prove they're right. They want to show the world they're smart. The 5% have killed their ego. They don't care about being smart, they care about being consistent. They have accepted that the market is uncertain, losses are inevitable, simplicity is power, patience is the edge. The boring routine. When you reach the top 5%, trading stops being exciting. The rush is gone. It becomes as routine as brushing your teeth. You wake up, you look for your setup, you execute, you walk away. That boringness is the sign of a professional. If you are still feeling the thrill of the gamble, you are still in the 95%. David fought the market with 47 indicators and lost. Sarah flowed with the market using 3 rules and won. The market is a river. You can try to swim against the current with all your strength, complexity, and effort, or you can build a boat, a simple system, and let the current take you where it's going. Kill the complexity. Kill the need for certainty. Follow the rules. The money will follow you.